I think that really what's gone on in terms of some of the paralysis here in Washington. Or difficulties in negotiations just have to do with some very stark differences in terms of policy. Some very sharp differences in terms of where we stand on issues. And if you think about, let's say, myself and Speaker Boner. I like Speaker Boner personally, and when we went out and played golf we had a great time. But that didn't get a deal done in 2011. When I'm over here at the Congressional. Picnic and folks are coming up and taking pictures with their family. I promise you, Michelle and I are very nice to them and we have a wonderful time. But it doesn't prevent them from going onto the floor of the house and blasting me for being a big spending socialist. And the reason that, in many cases, Congress votes the way they do, or talks the way they talk. Or takes positions in negotiations that they take doesn't have to do with me. It has to do with the imperatives that they feel in terms of their own politics, right? They're worried about their district. They're worried about what's going on back home. I think there are a lot of Republicans at this point that feel that given how much energy has been devoted in some of the media that's preferred by Republican constituencies to demonize me. That it doesn't look real good socializing with me. Charlie Crist down in Florida I think testifies to that. And I think a lot of folks say, well, if we look like we're being too cooperative or too chummy with the president. That might cause us problems. That might be an excuse for us to get a challenge from somebody in a primary. So that tends to be the challenge. I promise you, we invite folks from Congress over here all the time. And when they choose to come, I enjoy their company. Sometimes they don't choose to come. And that has to do with the fact that I think they don't consider the optics useful for them politically. And, ultimately, the way we're going to get stuff done, personal relationships are important. And obviously I can always do a better job, and the nice thing is that now that my girls are getting older, they don't want to spend that much time with me anyway, so I'll be probably calling around. Looking for somebody to play cards with me or something, because I'm getting kind of lonely in this big house. So maybe a whole bunch of members of the House Republican caucus want to come over and socialize more. But my suspicion is getting the issues resolved that we just talked about. The big stuff, whether or not we get sensible laws passed to prevent gun violence, whether or not America is paying its bills. Whether or not we get immigration reform done, all that's going to be determined largely by where. The respective parties stand on policy, and maybe most importantly, the attitude of the American people. If the American people feel strongly about these issues and they push hard, and they reward or don't reward members of Congress with their votes, if they reject sort of uncompromising. Positions or sharp partisanship or always looking out for the next election. And they reward folks who are trying to find common ground, then I think you'll see behavior in Congress change. And that will be true whether I'm the life of the party or a stick in the mud. Thank you very much, everybody. Barack Obama. Final presidential press conference. Delivered December 16, 2016, White House, Washington, D. C. Good afternoon. This is the most wonderful press conference of the year. I've got a list of who's been naughty and nice to call on. But let me first make a couple of quick points, and then I'll take your questions. Typically, I use this year-end press conference to review how far we've come over the course of the year. Today, understandably, I'm going to talk a little bit about how far we've come over the past 8 years. As I was preparing to take office, the unemployment rate was on its way to 10%. Today, it's at 4.6%, the lowest in nearly a decade. We've seen the longest streak of job growth on record. And wages have grown faster over the past few years than at any time in the past 40. When I came into office, 44 million people were uninsured. Today, we've covered more than 20 million of them. For the first time in our history, more than 90% of Americans are insured. In fact, yesterday was the biggest day ever for healthcare.gov. More than 670,000 Americans signed up to get covered, and more are signing up by the day. We've cut our dependence on foreign oil by more than half, doubled production of renewable energy. Enacted the most sweeping reforms since FDR to protect consumers. And prevent a crisis on Wall Street from punishing Main Street ever again. None of these actions stifled growth, as critics predicted. Instead, the stock market has nearly tripled. Since I signed Obamacare into law, our businesses have added more than 15 million new jobs. And the economy is undoubtedly more durable than it was in the days when we relied on oil from unstable nations and banks took risky bets with your money. Add it all up, and last year, the poverty rate fell at the fastest rate in almost 50 years. While the median household income grew at the fastest rate on record. In fact, income gains were actually larger for households at the bottom and the middle than for those at the top. And we've done all this while cutting our deficits by nearly two-thirds and protecting vital investments that grow the middle class. In foreign policy, when I came into office, we were in the midst of two wars. Now, nearly 180,000 troops are down to 15,000. Bin Laden, rather than being at large. Has been taken off the battlefield, along with thousands of other terrorists. Over the past 8 years, no foreign terrorist organization has successfully executed an attack on our homeland that was directed from overseas. Through diplomacy, we've ensured that Iran cannot obtain a nuclear weapon without going to war with Iran. we opened up a new chapter with the people of Cuba. And we brought nearly 200 nations together around a climate. Agreement that could very well save this planet for our kids. And almost every country on Earth sees America as stronger. And more respected today than they did 8 years ago. In other words, by so many measures, our country is stronger and more prosperous than it was when we started. That's a situation that I'm proud to leave for my successor. And it's thanks to the American people, to the hard work that you've put in. The sacrifices you've made for your families and your communities. The businesses that you started or invested in, the way you looked out for one another. And I could not be prouder to be your president. Of course, to tout this progress doesn't mean that we're not mindful of how much more there is to do. In this season in particular, we're reminded that there are people who are still hungry. People who are still homeless, people who still have trouble paying the bills or finding work after being laid off. There are communities that are still mourning those who have been stolen from us by senseless gun violence. And parents who still are wondering how to protect their kids. And after I leave office, I intend to continue to work with organizations and citizens doing good. Across the country on these and other pressing issues to build on the progress that we've made. Around the world, as well, there are hotspots where disputes have been intractable. Conflicts have flared up, and innocent people are suffering as a result. And nowhere is this more terribly true than in the city of Aleppo. For years, we've worked to stop the civil war in Syria and alleviate human suffering. It has been one of the hardest issues that I've faced as president. The world, as we speak, is united in horror at the savage assault by the Syrian regime and its Russian and Iranian allies on the city of Aleppo. We have seen a deliberate strategy of surrounding, besieging, and starving innocent civilians. We've seen relentless targeting of humanitarian workers and medical personnel. Entire neighborhoods reduced to rubble and dust. There are continuing reports of civilians being executed. These are all horrific violations of international law. Responsibility for this brutality lies in one place alone. With the Assad regime and its allies Russia and Iran. And this blood and these atrocities are on their hands. We all know what needs to happen. There needs to be an impartial international observer force in Aleppo. That can help coordinate an orderly evacuation through safe corridors. There has to be full access for humanitarian aid. Even as the United States continues to be the world's largest donor of humanitarian aid to the Syrian people. And, beyond that, there needs to be a broader ceasefire that can serve as the basis for a political rather than a military solution. That's what the United States is going to continue to push for. Both with our partners and through multilateral institutions like the UN. N.